Hey everyone, Edward Jimenez here again to talk to you about your insurance policy for upcoming hurricane season. And today we're going to start diving into the meat of an insurance policy. And actually, I'd like to show you where some of your property coverages are found within the full form insurance policy, just going beyond the basic pages that we've talked about so far in the prior videos. So I've decided to use a basic Citizens Property Insurance Corporation residential policy. This may be the most ubiquitous insurance policy in the state of Florida because Citizens is one of the larger insurance companies. So this is a good place to look, and maybe this applies to a lot of you watching this video. So in the prior videos, we looked at the basic declarations pages that I have up here on the screen right now, but I'd like to go more into detail with you about where to find the descriptions and definitions that talk to you about what these coverages actually are beyond just the limits that you have for each. I think it's important to understand that because, well, really without understanding that, you don't know whether your limits are accurate. So let's go beyond these first pages for the first time and actually start looking into the meat of the policy, so to speak. And depending on how your insurance company structures the organization of your policy, usually within the first few pages, you're going to find the beginning of the actual policy. And actually seeing something like this, a table of contents, is a good indication that you're starting the full form of your insurance policy. So if you're starting to see this, safe to say that the full policy is coming up soon. So we can see here the Citizens policy is entitled Citizens Homeowners 3 Special Form. It has a policy number you can see here. And this is where your actual full insurance policy language begins. And so if you're really looking into it, this is what you want to be seeing is typically it's two-column style insurance policy with just hundreds of words written on every page. This is where the meat of your insurance coverages are located. So let's look at some of the important sections of this. Now, I just glossed through definitions. Obviously, these are important for understanding different terms within your policy, but let's look at what's actually covered. All right. So earlier we looked at the declarations page. We saw A, B, C, D, E, and even F. Those are just titles for different coverages that you have on your property, with the first being coverage A, dwelling. All right. And this is going to tell you here, as you can see in page 4, we're into the meat of this policy, what that actually means. Now, typically, your dwelling coverage is the actual building structure that you're residing in, or if you're a business that you're operating in. It's the largest building on the property, typically. So that is going to be your dwelling coverage, and that's why you usually see that as the most extensive coverage in these policies. Now, that is important to distinguish from coverage B, what's called other structures, is very important to understand what kind of coverage you're getting here. Some policies and insurance companies will define this term differently. Typically, it's covering structures on your property that are set apart from the main dwelling by clear space. So this could be a shed, it could be a secondary guest home, things of that nature. Sometimes, depending on the policies, again, even a fence could be considered an other structure as opposed to a dwelling structure. And again, depending on the type of fence you have, how big it is, and what you're insuring for your main dwelling and other structures, you could be actually underinsuring yourself for things like fences. For example, if that's something you've invested in your home recently, you want to make sure you're properly covering that, because if a hurricane comes by, that's the first thing that's going to blow over and blow away. So you want to make sure that you're properly insured for that. Another important coverage here, personal property. So things like furniture, clothing, shoes, sometimes even jewelry. All of those things can be covered under your personal property coverage with your insurance policy. So let's say you have a really bad plumbing break, for example, and it's a master bathroom, and on the other side of the master bathroom is a closet. And that pipe just leaked and leaked for hours and hours and flooded your whole closet, and all your shoes are destroyed. This would be an example of a coverage that you can take advantage of to get the fair compensation for an item that you may have lost in that flood water. There should also be some additional coverage here in this policy, as you can see, for loss of use, which can be broken down into two different very important things, especially in Florida. An additional living expense coverage can be, as I've stated in a prior video, God forbid you suffer a loss that's so tragic you can't even live in the house anymore. this coverage will actually give you the expense necessary to reside in a replacement dwelling for an extended period of time. It just depends how much coverage you have and how extensive the damages are to your home. If you are a landlord and you're renting out your home and some similar situation occurs where you can no longer rent it, or the renters decide they can't live in there anymore because the damage is so bad and they move out, you can't rent it anymore, this coverage would qualify you for the fair rental value that you've lost until you can rent that property again. So those are the most basic property coverages. I'll just quickly touch on, if you continue through the policy through the second part, eventually you're going to get to the liability coverages, which I'm sure I'll hit on here in a moment. And that is going to tell you what coverages you have in the event that someone is injured on your property. And here you see it here under section 2. And so this would be not the most important coverage for you. And it's not as extensive typically in these policies in terms of its length. But again, you'd want to know what kind of liability you're protected against. God forbid, again, someone falls on your property. If there's a fight on your property, even if it's not your guests, or let's say an animal is on your property and bites somebody, things like that are going to be defined in your liability section, so that you know what kind of coverage you have in the event one of those things happens to you. So this is where you can find these things throughout your policy. And kind of a handy thing was what we looked at in the very beginning. You can see the table of contents, and you can kind of pick out these things here and find them. I would highly recommend you read these things. You understand what kind of coverage you have, or what the definitions are of these things. And if you don't understand, again, speak to your agent that you bought the policy from, or speak to me. I'm happy to give you my opinions on your particular policy, because what I'm showing you is not the same for every insurance company. Some of these companies define these terms differently. So if you happen to need a second opinion on that, I'd be happy to provide that to you. So that's where you can find some of those important coverages in your policy. And we'll continue to talk more about these things in a following video. Thank you.